Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon.
Pumped up on Mars, juice, and ketamine.
He is the Thomas Edison plus of our age.
Probably his whole life is from a position of insecurity. I feel for the guy.
I would say 98% really appreciate what he does, but those 2% that are nasty, they are out there in full force.
We are meant for great things in the United States of America, and Elon reminds us of that.
I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, July 1st. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. The fight is back on. In one corner, Donald J. Trump. In the other, Elon Musk. And over the past few days, tensions between the two men have built and built to the point that the barbs and threats are flying once again. It's a quickly evolving situation, so we're beaming in from D.C. ace Bloomberg political reporter and fellow Conn College alum, Josh Green, to break it down for us. Hey, Josh.
Go Camels.
Go Camels. Later on, Elon Inc. stalwart Dana Hall and I will catch up on Tesla, where there's something of a management shakeup in the works that comes just before we get a fresh look at the sad state of the company's EV sales. And then we'll talk briefly with an old pal of mine, our executive editor for Latin America, Creighton Harrison, to go over a new Musk feud brewing south of the border. Okay, so Josh, for those out there who have missed round two of the fight, bring them up to speed. It all seemed to start on Saturday, yeah?
So if we rewind about a month, the tweets were flying. Trump and Elon were going back and forth. The whole world was sort of watching like in drop-jawed amazement. We remember all these personal attacks on Twitter and the Epstein files and that. And essentially Elon's kind of friends just like held him back like you do in a schoolyard play. Well, Elon has broken containment. And in the last, 24 hours, 48 hours has started tweeting like more and more hysterically about all the things that are wrong with Trump's big, beautiful bill. Mainly the fact that they cut his EV, green energy subsidies and stand to cost his companies, I would assume, tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars. But he's become critical of the bill. He's threatened Republicans to support it. First, he said he was going to primary them. Then he said he was going to start a centrist third party he wants to call the American Party. And then he started tweeting memes of Pinocchio and sort of shaming these guys for grandiose levels of hypocrisy for saying that they want to balance the budget while they're blowing it wide open with this new Republican spending bill.
Well, we have to say that he has something of a point. I mean, this bill will indeed absolutely add to deficits in the debt. And of course, this is, something that's been going on for years and years now from both sides of the aisle. Right now, it's the Republicans' turn to do so again. And he definitely seems to become a bit obsessed with the debt issue.
Basically, Elon is belatedly discovering what anybody with two eyes in Washington already knows, which is that while Republicans talk a big game about concern over the deficit, at the same time, for decades, they happily vote for bills that will increase the deficit. I think in this case, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has said that it's going to increase the deficit by something like $3 trillion.
Right.
And it would be even worse if Republicans weren't clawing back some of that money by zeroing out a lot of these clean energy and EV subsidies that are costing Elon as well. So on the one hand, his whole program of Doge and finding all these cuts and balancing the budget hasn't really worked out. Budget's going to get much, much, much bigger. The budget deficit is. And at the same time, it's going to cost Elon personally a lot of his companies. And, judging from his social media posts over the last, few days, he just seems to have gotten into one of those kind of angry cycles where he's kind of mass tweeting to the point that Trump took notice and at like 1 a.m. the other night sort of said, like threateningly, well, look, you Elon, your companies are huge beneficiaries of these subsidies. Maybe we'll take a look at some of your stuff. And I think he even said this to reporters in a gaggle that he might want to Doge Elon Musk's own companies the same way that Musk doged the government when he was in there trying to find cuts.
I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible?
For a while, it seemed like Trump, sort of like in round one, Trump was trying to ignore Musk and hoping it would go away. And Musk was just boxing against himself in the middle of the ring. But at some point, indeed, as you're saying, Trump jumped in, sort of tepidly at first. And then he kind of kept building momentum. The threatening to sick the Doge kids, Josh, on the Doge father. Man,
yeah.
I mean,
big balls going after Elon would be like Luke going after Darth Vader. I mean, imagine the showdown.
That you must have been listening in to me and our producer here, Magnus Henriksen, this morning, because I think that reference came up. But in any event, it didn't just stop at threatening to unleash the Doge kids on the Doge father. Trump also raised the specter of deporting Musk, which I don't know. I'm not sure about the legality of such a move, but it seems to keep coming up now.
Yeah, it does. And as usual with a lot of things that kind of burrow into Trump's brain, I think the genesis of the deport Elon idea came from Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, who is now a big media personality on his podcast, The War Room, somebody I've written about quite a bit, talked to a lot. Bannon famously feuded with Elon over the first, 6 months of the Trump administration. And I think ultimately kind of won that feud.
Yeah, I will interrupt briefly to say, Josh, It's funny because initially for the first few weeks, the first few months, it looked like not only was Bannon losing, it looked like he was getting his ass kicked. But now you're absolutely right. It suddenly seems to look like not only is he winning, he's winning in an enormous way.
Yeah, in an enormous way. And once Elon kind of fell out with Trump, something that Bannon helped kind of spur and provoke, Bannon has done a kind of danced on Elon's political grave, if you will. And as Elon's criticism ramped up, I think Bannon was the one who first called to deport Elon, which is how I think reporters and Trump first got wind of this. But as the careful journalist that I am, guys, I actually texted Bannon right before the show to say, hey, just checking my facts here about
wait a minute. So this
Bloomberg.
Just in. Okay.
This just in. Like in the last 3 minutes, I said, did you start the whole deport Elon push? I'm about to do a podcast. Just want to check my facts. Bannon just texted back. He said, quote me, deport the arrogant back to South Africa. So I take that as a confirmation that Bannon was the genesis of all of this. And then reporters asked it to Trump and Trump said, yeah, that's something that I'm thinking about. So,
well, there we are.
It's a cycle of life and like the Trump era media narratives. This is how they begin and metastasize.
It's also a note to self that don't ever pick a fight with Steve Bannon. For a while, it looked like the thing, like I said, was an absolute wipeout. Musk was just dominating. He was in the West Wing all the time. He and Trump were bosom buddies. Bannon was on the outside, looking in and screaming at the top of his lungs and getting nowhere. But I suppose he was playing a bit of a long game, and he is having his moment. Now, as I said earlier, Josh, I don't know about the legality of deporting a naturalized citizen, but this administration has shown itself willing to unearth heterodox legal theories to make things happen. So I suppose who the hell knows?
Yeah, and it's got a fairly compliant Supreme Court. So if Trump wanted to make a stab at it, one of the conspiracy theories Bannon has pushed is that Musk himself was an illegal immigrant at some point. And, if the government is sort of digging up offenses from decades ago as pretext to deport people, why couldn't they deport Musk too? Now, we don't know if there's any truth to that. And I will say, as a veteran Trump observer, I don't really take his threat too seriously because Trump never rules anything out. Like if a reporter asks him, Mr. President, or will you consider, you thinking about deporting Elon Musk? He'll say something like, well, we're going to take a look at that. Well, Trump will take a look at anything you want to ask him about. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to follow through on it. So if I were Elon, I'd be a little bit nervous, but I wouldn't necessarily be a lot nervous.
Understood. Now, Elon, on his end, is not letting up. He keeps banging the drum. As you said, he initially was threatening to primary any members of the Senate and perhaps of the House as well who backed these tax cuts in this bill, the big, beautiful bill. He's talking about forming a new party, as you said, the America Party. Let's start with the primarying threat. Does he have at this point in time the ability, through threats and money and coercion and so on and so forth, to change any votes on Capitol Hill?
I really don't think he does. I think Elon thinks that money and tweets are the most powerful form of political currency. But anyone with any level of sophistication in U.S. politics knows that, at least when it comes to Republican politics, it's Trump's endorsement that matters. That's 98% of the ball game. Elon's money might be the other 2%. I think what finally provoked Trump into attacking Elon this second time around was that, he's in the middle of trying to pass his big, beautiful bill. There are a lot of Republican holdouts. It's going to be a very tight vote either way. And I think Trump began to worry that Elon's threats of dumping money into these primary races might give some swing voters cold feet and imperil his bill. That's why he kind of issued the threats. But as far as Elon Musk on his own being able to recruit and fund dozens, presumably, of candidates to challenge Republican incumbents, I think is just folly. I mean, he doesn't have that kind of political power. I don't think he has the attention span to follow through on any of this for a minute. And I think if he did, it would be an expensive boondoggle, because in a lot of ways, as influential as Elon Musk has been in American politics over the last year or so, in some ways he strikes me as one of the most naive people I have ever encountered at a high level of national politics, because he fundamentally really doesn't understand what the levels of power are and how they work. If you are a conspiracy theorist prone to living your life on social media the way that Musk is, you think that money and backroom deals are kind of how things happen and how Washington operates, but they're really not. Politicians deal with pressure from their constituents and from the people above them. And right now in the Republican Party, Donald Trump is 100 million times more important than Elon Musk. And a lot of these Republicans don't want to get crosswise with Donald Trump.
So you're very dubious that Musk manages to put together a slate of candidates to primary those who back the bill. I suppose then, by extension, you're even more dubious of the creation and the sustainability of the great American Party.
Yeah, look, the idea of a rich guy forming a centrist third party is such like a tired, cliched idea that so many rich people and kind of gadfly political figures have had before, that it's sort of astonishing to me that he's just sort of stumbling on for the first, onto this idea for the first time.
I had an epiphany.
He's making the same mental mistake that every one of these rich guys makes, that like, I, the rich guy, am not happy with Republican excesses or Democratic excesses. I want something right in the middle. I want a political party that agrees with every single one of my views. I think there's a huge constituency out for that. And if there isn't, I'll take my money and just buy one. That's just not the way American politics works. So he could drop, what he spent $300 million back in Trump. He could drop $300 million starting an American party, centrist party. And I don't think he would manage to get one electoral vote or win one seat in the House or Senate. I mean, you say I'm dubious. Is there a word beyond dubious?
Yes. I mean, yeah, I feel like during our time at Connecticut College, they must have taught us, much.
Yeah, I was an English
fancier
major.
words.
I should know this stuff. But yeah, I think everybody views this as sour grapes and empty threats from Elon Musk.
Okay. Now, I need a prediction from you as we wrap up here, this first segment. You may be familiar, or you may not, with an acronym Max Chafkin launched a couple weeks back. Mammut, Josh, Mammut, which is MAMUWT. Musk always makes up with Trump. This was a riff on taco, Trump always chickens out.
Yeah.
We decided to come up with our own. And so then these listeners, or one listener in particular, came up with a bunch of, Mexican dish acronyms, enchilada and burrito, that all essentially said the same thing. Musk, who has a lot more to lose than Trump, always makes up with Trump. So I ask you, is this the second of many rounds between the two of them? Is it a second of two? How does the fight end? Do we indeed get Mammut, or does it end with big balls taking out Musk at Trump's behest?
I don't know. I think there's sort of a half-life to these things. The first fight was big and sort of powerful and exciting, and this one's a little bit less so. And I think ultimately Musk is going to wind up, as so many people on Twitter or X do, is just, a guy kind of complaining into the void who isn't really listened to anymore. I think that if Musk's companies are explicitly threatened, someone will prevail on him to kind of quiet down and smooth things over with Trump temporarily. It's hard for me to ever imagine that he'll fully recover his status in Trump's universe, a guy who could just sort of parachute into Mar-a-Lago, sit at the president's dinner table and get all sorts of things that he wanted to. I think that ship has sailed. But, at the end of the day, Musk needs Trump more than Trump needs Musk. And so he's going to have to kind of bow down and kiss the ring, or at least quiet down if he wants to stop Trump from going after a lot of his companies. I mean, one danger that Elon and his investors certainly must be aware of is that Trump is a vindictive guy. I mean, he has focused his entire second term on retribution. And, if Elon falls in the crosshairs, he has an awful lot to lose. And I don't think that Trump necessarily does. Trump isn't going to run for office again, so he doesn't need another $300 million from Elon. All he needs from Elon is to not screw up the passage of his big, beautiful bill, which I think he's probably accomplished. And after that, Elon can complain all he wants, but I don't think he's going to get back into Trump's good graces. And there's certainly a core group of MAGA Trump supporters led by people like Steve Bannon who absolutely loathe Elon and want to stab him in the back any way they can, whether that's canceling NASA contracts or zeroing out EV subsidies or what have you.
I actually don't think they want to stab him in the back. The sense I have is they want to stab him.
Well, they want to stab him in the front. Yeah, okay.
Right. Mr. Green, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Oh, and as it turns out, the Senate just this second passed the big, beautiful bill, sending it now back to the House. Okay, let's talk Tesla now. Lots going on there, and we have Dana to bring us up to speed on it all. Dana, hello.
Hey, David. Good to be back.
So, Dana, you had, being the scoop machine you are, a terrific scoop last week that everyone followed, and you followed it up yourself with another scoop. A gentleman by the name of Omid Afshar left Tesla as part of what seems like maybe a bit of a bigger, broader shakeup there. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so this was wild. I mean, Omid joined Tesla in 2017 basically as an assistant. He worked for Sam Teller, who was Elon's chief of staff. And then through the Model 3 ramp and as time went on, Omid consolidated power and really was Elon Musk's right-hand man for years. He oversaw the construction of the Gigafactory in Texas. He often traveled with Elon. He was sort of front and center as the right-hand guy. And if you asked people within Tesla, where does the power lie? It was always with Omid. So the fact that Omid is now out is really stunning. For Tesla watchers, I mean, Omid has been the key for a really long time. And it just sort of goes to show that even Elon's closest confidants don't always last. I just never thought I'd see the day that Omid himself would be ousted.
You use that term ousted. It is your sense in your reporting that he indeed was ousted and did not opt to leave himself.
Correct. And it's tricky. We don't use the word fired because, frankly, I don't know. I mean, sometimes people are strongly encouraged to resign. Sometimes the writing is on the wall. I mean, ousted seems fair. But, I wasn't in the meeting when this happened, so we had to be a little bit careful about the language. Other outlets have said fired. We said has exited, I believe.
Got it. Now, his departure does come on the heels, I don't necessarily know, in the immediate aftermath of some of these other departures, but it is one now of several in recent months, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Tesla has turnover in the executive ranks, and there have been some high-profile departures this year of Milan Kovac, who oversaw the Optimus bot, David Lau, who was the VP of Vehicle Software. So, yeah, there have been some departures. I think that one thing I want to make clear is, a lot of people are blaming this on sales, but that doesn't totally make sense to me because Omid was really the person who oversaw manufacturing in the Gigafactory in Texas. And then the sales directors reported to him. But I feel like this must be about something larger than just the bad quarter. I mean, something else must have happened. That is my instinct.
Now, when you say the bad quarter in sales, you mean the first quarter, or you mean the quarter that's about to end, or that did just end yesterday, and that we're going to get, I believe, figures on tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm speaking about the second quarter. So all indications are that Tesla's going to see another pretty drastic year-over-year decline. In the second quarter of 2024, Tesla delivered 444,000 vehicles. This quarter, you've got some analysts like Ryan Brinkman as low as 360K.
Wow.
Musk has always said that people don't like to buy cars in the winter, but it's quite possible that they also don't like to buy cars in the spring and the summer. So, we won't know until we get the figures tomorrow.
Right now, when it comes to Teslas, it seems like they don't like to buy them indeed in the winter, the spring, the summer, and the fall, unfortunately.
So the other thing that's happening is that now, Elon always focuses his attention on the parts of the company where there are issues. So as we just reported today, now the head of North American sales, Troy Jones, who used to report to Omid, is now reporting directly to Elon. So Elon is taking a more active role in overseeing the sales operation in both the US and Europe.
I did read that this morning, and as you said, indeed, another great scoop from you and the crew. And it made me laugh just a little because, of course, it feels like overwhelmingly much of the sales issues that Tesla have been created by Musk. So, and now he has tasked himself with fixing the problems that he himself, through his political endeavors, has created. And as you often point out, Dana, he pulls things off like this all the time. He's got a pretty big task ahead of him here, though.
Yeah, I think, look, it's not just Elon's politics, it's the vehicle lineup. You had people inside the company pushing Musk to make a more affordable, truly mass market $25,000 car, and Elon didn't go for that. And instead we have the Cybertruck, which has like a weird cult following in some quarters, but by all accounts is like a bit of a dud in terms of being a high volume mover. It has been subject to scores of recalls.
So there have been scores of Cybertruck recalls. And you said, it has this little bit of a cult following, but it's broadly speaking been a dud. And we have the Cybertruck, and we don't have that cheap mass model vehicle.
Yeah, and now we have enormous policy uncertainty with the federal government and all of the incentives that Tesla has greatly benefited from through, tax credits for electric vehicle purchases and the Inflation Reduction Act are potentially on the shopping block here, depending on what happens with the Senate bill today. So, Tesla is in a bad spot, and, I don't see how they're going to turn around sales. And that's why you're seeing Musk, the focus for him is all about the robotaxi, because that's going to be their next big thing. And Elon is always about the next big thing.
Now, I have seen, Dana, some of these new Model Ys trickling out. I've seen them out in the wild. Not a cause for optimism of any kind, the Y refresh?
I think it's a great refresh, but it's a refresh. It's not a new model. And then when you get back to the issue of Musk's politics, here in the Bay Area and all over California and probably much of the world right now, you see these Tesla cars that have the sticker that say, I bought this before Elon went crazy. If you bought a refreshed Model Y, that means that you actually made the decision to buy the vehicle, even knowing what Musk has done politically. So it just has not been this huge boost to sales that people were hoping for.
Okay. On sales, one last question there. We, of course, through the winter and the early spring, we just saw some absolutely brutal numbers, especially out of Europe, like in some countries, year over year, down 60, down 70%, just mind-boggling numbers. As bad as this second quarter is now apparently shaping up, any signs, though, that there's at least a bottoming out of that collapse in sales?
I don't know, frankly, how bad it can get. What is Tesla doing to woo back the customers that it lost in, blue states like California? I don't know if they're doing anything. I have not seen a big, robust effort to kind of turn that around. And, Musk on the last earnings call was sort of like, they're seeing like a bump in sales in red states. That's like a trend line that I'm curious to see how much it pans out. But there's widespread economic uncertainty right now in the United States. Interest rates are still very high. There's a lot of questions about everything. And so cars are a really big purchase. I think you're seeing sort of a softening in the auto market in general.
Well, I think if there was any bump in Tesla sales in red states, that is probably disappearing pretty quickly. You keep fighting with Trump, and you're gonna put a bullet into any kind of momentum you may have had there. Dan, as we let you go, I'll just say it's funny because, of course, Musk does love to point investors at how they should forget about the cars and forget about, the Y and the X and the 3 and all that. We're an AI company and we're optimists and we're the robo-taxi and all that. And all that's fantastic. But man, in the meantime, before you get to that vision, you have to move some metal here, right?
Yeah, because that's their revenue is still largely selling cars. But, in the future, as Musk has said many times, like, owning a car is going to be like riding a horse, David. The future
yes.
Elon sees this pivot to, driving as a service and a luxury. And I have to remember, Tesla used to talk about how they were going to build 20 million cars a year by 2030. They've completely backed off from that claim. They are not in the business of really building that many cars anymore. And so I think you're just going to see a lot of dominoes start to fall. There's going to be an overcapacity problem. And they might only sell 1.5 million units this year. That's a far cry from the 20 million that they once talked about.
All right, Dana, we will see how those numbers come out tomorrow, and we will see you next week.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm now joined by our caudillo in Latin America, executive editor for the region, Creighton Harrison. Creighton, hello.
Hello. Hi. It's good to be here.
And it's terrific having you. Now, Creighton, the last segment of the show is often a feud. We do Feud Watch. Max, who's not here this week, Max Chafkin, he loves to bring all these feud ideas. And this one seems to be low-key, low-simmering, certainly not at the level of Trump v. Musk, but interesting nonetheless. It started last week down there in Mexico City. Tell us about it.
Yeah, sure. So there was a rocket that blew up. I think you guys have talked about that. I think it was Starship 36. Is that the right number? There's been a lot of...
It seems like, I think the fourth explosion in short order,
right.
I believe. Yeah.
And when this one happened, there was some debris that was discovered shortly after in the state of Tamaulipas, right across the border from Starbase. Literally, I think a 10-minute drive from Starbase to get across the border into Mexico. And there were some environmentalists who started raising... again, the question of what to do with the debris that was falling from these rocket launches, because they have discovered what trash that they have attributed to the rocket launches in the past, including in the path of the sea turtles that they release.
So Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum brings this up last week in one of her weekly daily news conferences and says what exactly?
So she didn't bring it up, but she was prepared for an answer. A reporter asked about the space debris from SpaceX. And what President Sheinbaum said was, we are looking into these launches and we're looking into what laws may have been violated, right? And then we will take action. Which is sort of the word she used would sort of imply legal action as we see fit at the conclusion of our investigation.
To which SpaceX says what?
So SpaceX says a day later on Twitter, on their official account, says, we are, of course, interested in talking to the Mexican government about any debris that may have fallen in their territory. We are trying to cooperate with them. It would be really helpful if they could give us that debris back.
Okay.
Because that's our property.
So your sense, though, is watch this space. More to come from Claudia Sheinbaum and the Mexican government. In Sheinbaum, assuming this does continue to build into something, which, of course, we don't know that to be the case, but if it were to, what kind of opponent does Elon have here in the Mexican president?
Well, President Sheinbaum has obviously sort of gotten a reputation in the early... She's relatively new in her presidency. She was just elected last year. But of course, early in the Trump presidency as well, as a relatively smart negotiator with Trump. She has, been able to sort of keep him at bay at times when he has started threatening various actions against Mexico.
Oh, Jesus. So Creighton, maybe Musk needs to take some advice from her on how to handle Trump.
Yeah, there's something to that. But I bring Trump up because at the end of the day, with according to we have a great reporter on this, Amy Stillman, with some of the legal experts that she's talked to, if there's legal action, it's going to be against the U.S., not against SpaceX. right?
Oh, I see.
And that's because of the way international space law works. There are treaties over this sort of thing. And it's pretty unambiguous in international space law that if your junk drops in someone else's country, you are responsible for it and for any damage it causes. The only question around this is whether it's going to be legally treated as space debris, because this rocket was not going to space. It was actually inter-orbit, right? I mean, it was or inter-official space. That is going to be a legal question that I'm sure Claudia Sheinbaum's crack legal team is going over right now. But at the end of the day, these tend to, when we talk about international space law, these tend to be country to country and not country to company. Now, again, we can't rule out that they'll do something else. I'm sure they have very creative lawyers who are looking at every bit of this, but Musk may end up being in the middle of yet another point of contention between the U.S. and Mexico.
Yeah, that would be pretty ironic if it ultimately wound up being the three of them some way, somehow quarreling. All right, Mr. Harrison, thank you so much.
Good to talk to you.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong and edited by Anna Masarakis. Blake Maples handles engineering and Dave Purcell fact checks. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks, as always, to our supporters Joel Weber and Brad Stone. I'm David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you next week.